Glory to Jesus Christ. We are Group 3 and today we would like to present our reflection on the topic 10, Individual Conscience and Institutional Authority. Our group includes these members and each of us will present one part of this video reflection, and together we hope to show how this question, when to obey and when to resist, is not just a philosophical debate but a real one. Imagine you are ordered to do something that goes against everything you believe. A soldier ordered to fire on the civilians, a judge pressured to deliver an unjust verdict, a priest told to stay silent. What do you do? Do you obey or not? This is the heart of our topic. The conflict arises when the gap opens up between what the system commands and what conscience tells us is right. This is not rare. It happened in Germany, in Soviet labor camps, during military dictatorship across Latin America, and it's happening today. Each time the person faces the same question, comply or resist.
To analyze the link between conscience and authority, we will talk about two scenes of the film The Shoes of the Fisherman. In our group, we identified two key moments of resistance. The first one is in Siberia. We need to remember that Kirill has been trapped there for 20 years, even though he maintained his integrity against an oppressive system. We listen to the story of how he fought a guardian in order to steal bread to feed a really hurt person. It teaches us that personal responsibility does not disappear under a dictatorship. Conscience is the final refuge where the individual decides not to collaborate with injustice. We find the second moment when the Chinese leader asks a desperate question in the face of a massive famine. Is ideology worth more than the survival of his people? This crisis tests the hierarchy of values within global institutions. His conscience dictates that the material treasures are meaningless if humanity is starving. That's why he decides to donate the church's assets to save lives. Many question this act, but he proved that hope and human dignity stand above any protocol. His decision teaches us that one should obey the institutions as long as it serves the common good, but one must resist when the structure forgets its mission of charity. Authority is only legitimate if it protects lives.
Glory to Jesus Christ. As a Catholic, we should deeply respect hierarchy and authority. However, the Church teaching is unwavering. A law or comment that contradicts divine law has no validity. The movie Romero illustrates this perfectly. Archbishop Romero was just a pastor, not a political radical. Yet, when the government unleashed terror against its own people, his Christian conscience did not allow him to remain silent. His preferential option for the poor and vulnerable was not about class warfare, but the defense of human dignity. Romero demonstrated that when secular authority turns into tyranny and shed innocent blood, blind obedience to the state becomes complicity in sin. Okay, but what should be done when the conflict arises with the institutional authority of the Church itself? So, the ultimate measure is not the person or the hierarch, but the unchanging tradition and the truth of Christ. If a bishop or even a higher prelate departs from the faith, preaches heresy, or compels one to sin, disobedience becomes a moral duty. This is not rebellion against the Church, but rather fidelity to it. We are guided by the words of the Saint Paul. But even if we, or an angel from heaven, should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one we preached to you, let him be accursed. In the case of heresy, a personal conscience formed by Catholic doctrine demands resistance to a false authority. So, the line between obedience and resistance is clear. We obey when authority, secular or spiritual, acts within its legitimate power, does not contradict divine law, and serves the common good. We are obligated to resist when an institution coerces us into sin, attacks human life and dignity, or distorts eternal truth. Ultimately, whether defying tyranny like Romero, or defending the faith, the rule remains singular. We must obey God rather than man. Amen.
So moving on, whether to obey and occupy and power to their own survival or to follow their conscience and resist is a daily basis in Ukraine. Under the current martial law, a state's authority to mobilize every citizen for national survival has come into a direct conflict with individual conscience, especially from religious pacifists that believe that the right to conscientious objection is non-derogable. While the states argue that the existential threat overrides all exemptions, individuals are facing prison sentences to staying loyal to their pacifist beliefs. In occupied territories, just remaining resistant isn't just a military act, but it's a moral one, and local officials must choose between remaining loyal to their own ethic or to obey the new authorities while providing services. So this shows that when the state is under pressure, the individual conscience struggles against the weight of institutional authority, forcing us to ask, does our duty to our country ever truly override our duty to our own moral truth?
Career shows us that authority must be respected. Symbols like the army uniform, the cross of the church, or the presidential sash. But what happens when the institution says something different what your conscience says? In Peru history, there are moments when political parties or the state wants loyalty, but the obedience isn't blind. We need to obey when to try to protect the common good and human rights. Resistance is a moral duty when the institution is corrupt. If order of the army affects our dignity, if a party provides the power over the truth, or if the state silence our liberty, the conscience must be a strong presence. Resist isn't a cause. It remember that an institution is over human dignity. At last, real authority isn't the one which imposes their designs. Instead, it's the one which is reliable and gets our respect being fair.
So, to conclude our presentation, we found out that there is a conflict between individual conscience and authority. There is no easy answer. In the film The Shoes of the Fisherman, and in the real life in Ukraine and Peru, we see that authority loses legitimacy when it doesn't protect human life and dignity. In crisis, the state asks people to obey, but conscience is still important. It helps people choose what is right. At the same time, society needs rules and trust in authority. In conclusion, authority must respect human life. Only then we can have a balance between the state and conscience.